Well, welcome. Tonight, we talk to the person who has, in my mind, the most important position in the school system, in the town, and the one who has the greatest influence on our children and their effect on our families. Superintendent, how about an introduction?
Sure, I'm Kevin McIntyre. I'm the superintendent of the Milford Public Schools. I'm heading into my 10th year with the district.
Has it been 10 years?
It's been 10 years. It's hard to believe.
That's unusual, isn't it?
It is. Nationwide, I think the average tenure for a superintendent is about the same as an NFL career, which is a little under 4 years. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But, I think where it's going well and people stay longer, it tends to work pretty well.
Well, I always thought it was
Hopefully that's
because
the
of the
case.
school committee elections.
Well, that's definitely part of it because you get brought in by one group. People change over
And then
time.
they change and you got a whole different school committee and you're the guy that they didn't bring in.
Correct. And they have different ideas about maybe a different direction or, they're not happy about one particular thing or another, and that causes a lot of changes.
Well, I mean, it's tough too because I always laugh when they say it's so hard to get things through the school committee because you have to get 4 people agreeing out of 7.
Right.
And I sit there and say, really? Come to my job. I got to get 8 out of 15.
Right. And I would say probably 95+% of the time it's a 7-0 vote. And they generally are on the same page. Every once in a while you have an issue where there's some productive disagreement, but generally it's.
But in a way, you want that. I mean, I don't want everybody on the FinCom to be like me.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when we were adding people to the cable committee, and I nominated Bob Littleton, and people came and said, why would you ever pick him? He's so liberal, he's so different from you. I said, that's why.
Right.
I mean, I coached with Bobby for 7 years, but he came up with ideas that just would stop me because I would never think from the perspective he had.
No, and that's important because we serve every child in the town of in the town of Milford, and everybody has different viewpoints, different ideas, different thoughts, and different values, and we have to kind of support and reconcile all those things.
Okay, I'm going to be mean. How many kids do we have in the system now?
So we're a little over 4,600 is where we ended the year.
4,600.
So we're about 46, I think. 07 or 08 was on the last day of school.
Because I'll admit, for the first 7 years, I kept saying, Kevin, you're adding 1 student a year on average.
Yeah, so we've actually gone about 400 years. It hasn't been 10 years. It's that's actually the biggest challenge we're facing right now is just the increase in the student population, and it's kind of unpredictable because we've had a number of we get annual demographic studies done that do projections, and within 6 months the projections are already outdated because we've already exceeded the number in the projections because it's not coming from births in the community, Milford Hospital, or necessarily new construction. Now, we've got about 863 new dwellings coming online between this year and the next 4 to 5 years with some apartment complexes and some
the
developments.
apartment. I was gonna say, where are we getting 800 houses?
Yeah, it's not houses. It's a combination. It's actually a combination of houses, condominiums, townhouses, and apartments, the majority of which are apartments.
But even that's changed because when you think of the days of Laurelwood and Hopedale,
Right.
you could put in 200 units and have 3 kids
Correct.
because they were 2-bedroom units.
Correct. And now those are yielding
Now all of a
almost a
sudden,
kid per unit.
when you start talking about 1,800 a month for rent,
Yeah.
they're squeezing 2-3 kids plus a family into those 2
Correct.
bedrooms.
Correct. So places in, Len Morcone, who was our former transportation director, would lament this all the time, is we had a few over 50 developments that would have 0 kids, and now they're filling a third of a bus or a half of a bus, for a number of reasons, because people are starting older, grandparents are raising some children.
Kids are having to live together.
Yeah, families are blending in together. Yes, there's a lot of reasons why we're just seeing more and more kids coming
And if you
from.
think about it, when my 2 moved back home for a period of time, I was in heaven.
Yeah.
He kept saying, well, my darling bride kept saying, it's time for the little bird to leave the nest. I said, see these spikes? I'm spiking the nest to the tree. They never have to leave. It was
Right.
like heaven.
And my oldest son just graduated from college, and he's probably going to stay with us for a couple of years as he gets his sea legs underneath him because, I mean, look at how much housing has appreciated in the last couple of years. People were, anybody who puts their house on the market, and it's slowing down a little bit with the change in interest rates, but you're seeing, houses go for $150,000, $200,000 over asking.
I saw a notice that a house on Whitewood near us went for $950,000.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, you could have bought Milford for $950,000. They would have thrown in Hopedale and Mendon.
Exactly. It's crazy. And I think it's so tough for, kids or young families starting out to kind of like get a foothold. So I think that's why you're seeing, a larger percentage of the units having children.
Well, the other thing too is when I graduated, my friends and I, we had $32.80 in our pocket.
Right.
But we had $32.80.
Right.
You're seeing these kids graduate with
Just
$100,000,
crippling
$150,000.
debt. Yeah.
And you sit there and say, how the heck can you take on a car payment, a house payment, when you're already paying $1,000 or $1,500?
Well, I just saw the average car payment now is over $700 a month. The average is what people are paying. $700. So think $1,500 loan, $700 for cars. That's $2,200 right there.
Plus you have a wife that needs a car, so you're at $3,000.
Yeah, and that's before you even talk about housing. So it's tough out there for people.
So when we think about, take a snapshot today,
Mm-hmm.
what's it look like? And I know come August it'll change and all that good news, but today,
Mm-hmm.
how many extra kids are we going to have? 10, 20 this year?
That's the tough thing. It's hard to predict. What I can say is that our kindergarten class, and it's hard to say because when we wrap up kind of kindergarten registration, from like April through say October, we can gain anywhere from 60 to 120 additional kindergartners. And as of a couple weeks ago, we were about, I want to say 310, 312. So if we get 60 more, we've got one of our bigger classes. If we get 120 more, we have the all-time biggest kindergarten probably in the history of Milford. So I'm hoping it's more on the low end, just for the sake of space and class size. But we're watching it every week. I'm checking in with the Family Resource Center and saying, how many new ones do we have in?
But if you put it in perspective, 300 kids sounds like a new Brookside.
Right.
Bigger than a new Memorial.
Right. Yes, we've added an elementary school in the last, say, 4 to 5 years. And it's funny, we saw a little bit of a dip in the pandemic year, and we were kind of watching that and saying, hey, is this a different trend? But the students came back in full force this past year.
It's interesting because I kept saying there's a school coming.
Right.
When we were putting more and more money away in stabilization after
Right.
we finished Memorial,
Right.
we put more money in stabilization. Everybody said, well, not Memorial, Brookside. But we're done. I said, no, we got school coming. Then Woodland came in.
Right.
And we said, okay, that'll take care of us for the next millennia.
And Woodland's heading into year number 7 now, if like as crazy as that sounds.
And then when Woodland came in, we put more money in stabilization. They were like, why? I said, there's a school coming. And I don't think people understand, what do you get, 40, 50 years out of a school before you have to do something?
I'd say about probably 50 years, 50-ish.
And we have 5 major schools in Milford.
So do the math. What's that? 1 every 10 years, right?
1 every 10 years.
Yeah.
Even if we're not growing, just the depreciation of the school, you start looking at the numbers, what we have to save up, and the maintenance.
Right.
Because the days are gone when the old days of let the school run down till it's decrepit,
Right.
and then we'll go to the state and build a new one.
Right. Because they really grade you on, how well you're maintaining your schools across the board. And the good news is Milford gets the A rating every year, which is fantastic when MSBA does the assessment. So we've, as people know, we're putting in statements of interest for the new high school. One of the things we're doing is we're going to try to bring the 8th grade over to.
Okay, now stop. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no.
When you say statement of interest,
Yes.
I know what you mean. You know what you mean. There's a lot of people that sit there and say, what is
Yeah.
the process? The next school on the list is the high school.
Correct.
School committee's determined that is the one that we need to focus on. Now what do we do?
Yeah, so I'll even walk you back a little further in the process. So what we had to do initially is do basically an assessment of all our schools, which is a school facilities plan or an educational facilities plan. And we had to identify kind of, where some of the challenges were and what the priorities were. And we went through a process with the New England School Development Council, who does this kind of work throughout all of New England, is very well regarded. And it really, identified Milford High School as the number one priority. Once we've identified that as a priority, we have to go to the school committee and the select board and get them to sign off on, hey, this is a project that the community can get behind. So the elected officials initially have to get behind it. Once they vote, we put in what's called a statement of interest. And what a statement of interest does is it's basically an outline of what the issues and challenges are for school and why this particular building is a priority in your district. And so for Milford High School, it's it's the systems. District-wide is also our growing population, so we can maybe solve some of the space issues by this project, as well as provide kind of more of an environment for 21st century learning. So when I say systems, I'm talking about heating system, roof, plumbing, electric, basically the entire infrastructure of the building, which, is going to need, significant upgrading. And once the statement of interest goes through, say we're approved by the MSBA, and it might take a couple more years for that to happen, maybe a few more years for that to happen, because there's a whole list of districts across the state, and they have to prioritize, which buildings are in the, most dire need of either renovation or replacement. And following that, if we're brought into the program, we do an assessment, which is called a feasibility study, which I think costs about $1.5 million now. I know. There's probably a lot of things I'm going to say that may cause the paramedics to come here.
Well, the
this
good
evening.
news is we budgeted 1.5 million.
Yeah.
Because 2 years ago, we were at $1 million.
Yeah.
When the school committee came in and said, okay, that's great idea, but it ain't going to work anymore.
Yeah, and we're just seeing them come in higher, particularly for high school projects, which are a little more.
So 1.5 is not the
I think that's ballpark. Yeah, I think that's a fair ballpark number. And so what you do with a feasibility study is you determine whether the best course of action is a new building or a renovation.
Now, we pretend, like when we were looking at Woodland,
Right.
we went through all the motions of pretending that we would consider renovating the old Woodland.
Right.
When we all knew that wasn't going to work. That dog just won't hunt.
Correct.
This time, is there really a serious debate over whether we're going to renovate the school or build a new one?
Based on a lot of factors, it's most likely going to be, I think, a renovation and not a new building. But it's probably going to be a renovation similar to what we did with Brookside, where we're going to be doing some new building as part of the renovation.
I was going to say, you think? I mean, number one, where do we have land except Asylum Street?
Right.
And talk about a disaster.
Yeah.
Lenny Marcone couldn't even pull this off, never mind the good Dr. Legore. How would you run that many buses up those small streets in Route
Right.
140?
Right. So there's a practical, and there's a reason why most of our schools are located within the same area, because it's kind of the center of town in a lot of ways, or pretty close to the center of town. The other thing is they don't reimburse for pools, and I think we'd lose a lot of square footage if we shifted from like the building that we have to a new building. And I think if we better use that space, we can really kind of.
Well, my understanding is the auditorium. Well, maybe in high school would they give
You
us?
can have a high school auditorium, but
Okay.
we have cafetoriums at the.
I was going to say
at
Woodland. They had
yeah.
to play that.
Yeah.
Where's the P?
Yeah.
It's cafeteria. No, it's an auditorium. No,
Correct.
it's a cafetorium.
Yeah.
But thank God we have it.
Yeah, no, and it's used very, very frequently, and they're running programs out of there all the time now.
And the other 600-pound, or should I say, $350 million pound for pound issue is a brand new high school
Yeah,
would be 300 million or so.
yeah, and the good news that I'm starting to see is some of the commodity prices, like wood and some things, are starting to drop a little bit, which I think is good news, because the escalation on cost. Northbridge just did like a similar building to Woodland. It's a K6 for them, but it's a similar kind of footprint. and it was almost double the cost of what we spent for Woodland here in Milford. So it was about that project was, I think, somewhere between 110 and 120 million.
Holy moly.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you said moly.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
No, when I looked at new or renovating, I kept saying the new just doesn't, first of all, we don't have a place to put it.
correct.
I mean, can you imagine living on the other side of Milford, over by 495 in Medway? You'd take 2 days to make the caravan.
Exactly.
And then once you
Exactly.
got there, talk about being backed up.
Yeah.
There's just no easy way in and out of Asylum Street area.
Yeah, and the flow, and again, I think anywhere you put a high school, it puts strain on, the surrounding neighborhood, but to put it somewhere where it hasn't been before is a huge challenge.
And then you sit there and say, if we wanted to keep a pool, and that pool, I mean, good Dr. Fellows is really taking good care of it. And you sit there and say, we'd have to pay, we can have a pool. The MSNBC LMNOP doesn't say you can't have a pool.
Right.
They're just not going to contribute to it.
Correct.
So you'd have to pay dollar for dollar.
Correct.
And then my understanding is the paradigms, the rubrics that they use to measure the square foot per child, we're way over at Milford
At
High.
Milford High School, absolutely. You look at the hallway space, you never build a hallway like that main hallway that goes down the center of the building. The Library Media Center, which is stunning, you'd never have go up 3 stories basically. And you just don't see that kind of thing in schools as much anymore.
But Milford High to me is a bunker.
Yeah, oh yeah.
The fundamental cement walls still seem strong.
Yeah, I think the guts of it are, I think, okay. I mean, we haven't done a structural assessment, but we haven't, we've done a number of assessments over the last, I'd say, 5 to 7 years, and that's never come back as an issue. It's more the aging systems, the roof, the
Well, when we first
plumbing.
went in, I remember beginning of 74,
Hmm.
they had that new technology called a rotary phone in every class. That was the ultimate goal, is to wait till the teacher left the room
Yeah,
and try and call some other room,
right.
because it was so novel.
Yeah,
I mean, to me, the technology needs updating.
it does. It does.
But the
because,
walls?
it's hard to say, and again, I'm not an architectural or a design expert, but I think, a couple ideas I've heard from a number of, and you've even mentioned it, is, you'd probably, update a wing or two, shift people over, update another wing, something along those lines. So we could kind of occupy, because that's the other issue is we have to occupy while we're renovating.
Right. Well, but you mentioned it. I mean, this school has, before the next major event, it's got to be 45 years.
Right.
So you have to figure, I mean, Brookside Memorial split the load.
Mm-hmm.
Stacy and Woodland split the load. The high school is on its own.
Right.
So, again, I remember the first class out of Milford High, 222.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest I remember is like 260.
Yeah, I think and it's in that ballpark, because we always, from 8th to 9th grade, we see students obviously go to BVT, and we also see students go to some private schools.
Well,
so.
St. Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
Exactly.
But I think we used to lose about 60 kids
Yeah, give or take. Yeah.
between the private schools and all.
Yeah.
But you still were banging 260 at the biggest.
Yep.
But if you're adding 100, 200 kids a year,
Yeah. Those numbers are going to start increasing, because we're seeing that the high school, I think, wrapped up in a little over 1,300 kids, I want to say, at the end of the year.
wow.
Which is high for us, because we've been, I think when I first got here, we were like right around like 1,100, 1,150, somewhere in that ballpark. And so we basically added 150
But see,
kids.
I could see, and not that I'll pretend it's popular,
Yeah,
the school committee coming back saying, look, if we're really going to plan this for the next 45 years, we need X dollars from the town.
mm-hmm.
Because the SBA isn't going to let you project that far ahead. They won't let you overbuild, at least I don't think.
Right, yeah, and that's like, it's the problem at Woodland too. It's, Woodland, we've kept the, the WWF title of the largest elementary school for a couple of years because, our numbers are just going up. We've been over 1,000 there.
But now you start thinking about it, and I know this is gonna be blasphemy, and unfortunately, I can't deny that I'm for it because I'm on camera. But you start looking at, if we built a new wing, and I'm not an architect, so I don't know if it's a single or a two-story, I always wondered what that, the space going down to the cafeteria on the left is just empty.
Right.
Seems like a perfect place to put classrooms.
Yeah, yeah.
But we also, when I go to places like Shrewsbury and other schools, boy, it makes me envious of what they've done for their athletes with an in-house, a field house.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I'd love to make part of this project and almost make it like a field house / community center where we
Yeah.
can provide some services too that, meet the needs of, young families, maybe some of our senior citizens, where, it almost becomes like a place where people can go and congregate.
Well, but you think about it. One thing town meeting has never done is shortchanged our kids.
100%. They've been so supportive.
When you go there and yes, the FinCom, we're gonna bang our chest and say we're broke.
Yep.
The end of the day, what's right for the kids is right for the kids and right for the town. So, the idea of having a full field house, that can be community center, it can be all sorts of things if you do it right.
Yep.
And it's gonna hurt because I don't know that we're gonna get any SBA money for it.
I don't think so. I don't think there's any reimbursement on field houses. I think there's probably some programs, if we put some programs in there, where we might be able to get some grant money to cover it, but it's not going to be.
Have a few crumbs.
It's not going to be, maybe you cover 10 or 20% of it.
But, you think about it, when we looked at the football field, the football soccer field.
Yep.
How much reimbursement did we get? None. Zippo.
Yeah.
But it was the right thing to do for our kids.
And it gets used all the time. And, in the summertime, when I get in the morning, there's always, folks jogging or walking around the track. Same with the school. I mean, we have a group of folks that, walk around the high school in the wintertime.
They walk inside the school.
Yeah. So if we have a meeting at night, every once in a while it jars me because 3 people come around the corner and it's like 9:30 at night. But the school's open all the time for all kinds of different programs, and that's the way it should be.
But that's what keeps, I know it's being a bit self-centered, but it keeps the interest in the schools, even for people without kids.
Yeah.
A lot of people accept the fact that if you don't have a decent school system, your housing prices are going to be schnitzel.
Yep.
But the emotion goes away when they think that, oh, I used to walk in the school, I used to do this. There's so much going on. And that's why, as much as it seems blasphemous to say, go spend more money on a field house.
But it's going to be a resource for the entire community. It'll be primary school use, just like the fields are, but so many other folks take advantage of it.
And it's so important for the kids.
100%.
Because when you start saying, how do the track and field people practice in the winter? Up and down the corridors and
Right.
God bless.
And we get people who, we've got, kids who are, all state, make nationals, and we'd love to be able to provide, those kind of facilities so we can practice, for indoor track and, some of the other sports and, put in, I think, more state-of-the-art kind of weight training and those
we
kinds
just
of
did
things.
this with the chemistry wing.
Right.
Yeah,
And that's had a huge impact.
But
in the
you walked
sciences.
in and it was like, wow, this looks just like it did when I was here 40
Right.
years ago.
Right.
Holy moly, this is not what we want for our kids.
And I have to tell you, and I'm gonna bring this up and brag a little bit. We were identified by the Secretary of Education, the National Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardones.
Now, did he come to Milford?
He came to Milford High School for a visit, and when he went into those science labs, he was blown away. They used the virtual dissection table and showed him that, but he also was amazed by just how much like inquiry based and hands-on science that's happening, and a lot of it is because the community was willing to really invest in like the STEM programming at the high school. And that's not the reason he came, but he wanted to see some STEM classes, and he was just like, he's like, I'm blown away. He said, I go to schools all over the country, and what's happening in Milford is phenomenal.
And you think about it, the Massachusetts economy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we were growing up, my grandfather came to Milford in '39. It was shoe stores or
Right.
shoe factories.
Right.
Milford shoe, Bickford shoe, Porter shoe. Today, if we want our kids to be competitive, they're not training them as shoemakers anymore.
No.
And the biggest driver, and I know I'm prejudiced towards it, is biotech and science.
Yep.
So if we want them to be competitive, we got to provide the support.
Yeah, and I have to say that, Josh and his team at the high school have really, taken the resources that the community has provided, and they're investing it in a lot of different ways, not just science, but also, connecting kids to professionals in the community, through some mentoring programs. Now that we're kind of getting towards hopefully the end of the pandemic, we're starting to see internship programs coming back. And it's really getting kids like engaged, excited, and interested, and even just understanding what's out there. Because, as a kid, you're thinking, I want to be a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, throw a few more professions in there. But they're not thinking about like the things they do at Waters just down the road, where there's, the chemistry they're doing there, or some of the other companies that have just even settled right in Milford. But the 495 corridor is, like you said, a biotech and high-tech kind of super highway, and there's a ton of opportunity right in our backyard.
And when you start thinking about it, hiring somebody with bio-operator experience, that's starting at 50 grand plus.
100%.
I mean, that's not a bad job to start with.
It's the 2 years ago, I heard the average salary in advanced manufacturing was about $72,000, which, that's good money. And it's local, and, you can stay, if you want to stay in the area near the family, you can kind of make a really good living.
That's something that you and the administration have fostered and I always remember, oh God, this was back 20 years ago, when the budgets got destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget towns around us, the teachers, through the unions, were coming up saying they'll defer their raise.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, if I can't pay my mortgage today, how am I going to pay double mortgage in a year?
Right.
And unless I was part of it, I would have had a hard time believing. But the Milford Teachers Union came to the FinCom and said, we're willing to give up a raise, just forego it altogether, if you promise to keep that extra money in the school system to save teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, as a FinCom, we have no power.
Right.
All we can do is recommend.
Right.
But the fact that the union came to us, and afterwards I had to ask, I said, this doesn't seem normal, that the union comes and offers benefits to give them up to help. And they said, yeah, but we're all from Milford.
And that's the same spirit's alive today. I mean, we've seen, you've seen horror stories of communities like, school administration of the town fighting with the teachers or the teachers unions. And, there was a real spirit of cooperation throughout the pandemic. And I'm really proud of that, because I think there's such a commitment to the community. We had teachers at the very beginning of the pandemic, when nobody knew what was going on, delivering meals to families that needed it. They were saying, what can we do? What can we do to help out? And they were doing a lot of different things to help out. So those kind of things are things you don't necessarily hear about or aren't on the front page of the paper. But it kind of speaks to that spirit that happened all those years ago, that I think is still alive and kind of thriving today.
You're always going to have some push me, pull you.
Yeah.
I mean, we
That's
just
part of it. That's part of it, though.
We got through the budget cycle, and we have to start out saying, we are desolate. The Fin Committee has no money.
Right.
The FinCom is broke. And the school committee comes in and says, all we need is $9 billion extra dollars.
Because we need those gold-plated textbooks.
Yes. But when it comes down to it, we always seem to come together and make it happen.
100%. And I think it's, particularly what I've seen, and I think it's the benefit of being here for what's been a decade now, is I've seen some of the relationships evolve over time and the trust build. And we've had, I mean, Kathy Perry's been with us for, I think, more than 20 years now. Craig Consigli's been with us for 20 plus years. We have a lot of people in key positions. Our principals, I think, for the most part, have been here for a really long time. We've got Vicki Houston, who's the new principal at Brookside Elementary School. She's been in the district for 23
Forever.
years. Yeah.
Sorry, Vicki.
But I think that's good, and I think it speaks to, I think, the passion people have, for the community and for the schools. And I think, we see that every day, which is great.
But now we're facing some really unique challenges.
Mm-hmm.
I'll admit, my first reaction to hearing that the school committee is going to ask for an increase of $6 million is say, call Kevin, find out what narcotics he's on, and why isn't he sharing them? Because $6 million increase, holy moly.
Yeah, no, it's significant, but it's driven by, I think, two things. One is the, general increase in the student population, but two, it's the composition of the population.
It's the type of students.
Yeah, so we have, a much larger population of English learners, a much higher population of economically disadvantaged students, and the cost for, your average student with special needs is going up, pretty significantly.
Now, when we look at that, you say, it's going up.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to think that Milford is economically disadvantaged. But I heard a number about, is it 50% of our kids are on free lunch?
It's probably a little higher than that now.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so, one thing I'm hoping for, and this is something I've become a huge advocate for, particularly after the pandemic, is the federal government provided free breakfast and lunch for everybody across the nation the last couple of years. And I think that if we can kind of continue that kind of a program, because more kids ate lunch and breakfast than ever before. And I'm not sure exactly the reasons for it, but you didn't have to, everybody was getting lunch and breakfast. And I think the state's going to at least extend it, is what I'm hearing, for 1 year is the plan. I don't know if it's going to go through, but that's the plan right now. But it made such a difference, and kids were actually eating the lunches and the breakfast at levels that they never had before. Now Carla and her crew do an awesome job of providing great breakfast and lunches, but the participation rates went through the roof.
Well, I mean, anybody that knows Carla or the Olivas knows that there's not going to be a bad meal coming out of that kitchen.
Exactly. And some of the stuff, actually a lot of the stuff they do is fantastic, particularly as you move up to the high school level, where there's a ton of choices. There's a burrito bar, there's a deli, and there's a couple
I remember when
hot
Carla
lunch
came out and
choices.
said, my freezer died.
Yeah.
We need unexpected $80,000.
Yeah.
But you looked at Carla, that there's not a penny goes through she hasn't squeezed twice.
Absolutely.
So she got that support right away, and then we found out she's not only feeding the school, but she's doing the community programs and everything out of the high school.
Yeah, I mean, we've done, we've got our summer lunch program happening again, which has, been a great program for us at Memorial Elementary School, where, we've fed, I think, usually somewhere between 10 and 12,000 meals a summer.
Now, I don't think a lot of people really understand how important it is to have these food programs. When you say over 50% of the kids get free lunch, that means, if I remember right, family of 4 living on less than $34,000 a year.
It's right in that vicinity. So it's a very low threshold.
This is not frivolous extra, let's give them cake.
No. These are needed programs.
This may be the only way they get breakfast and lunch in a lot of homes.
Absolutely, and we're trying to do things to even offset, weekends and dinner opportunities, and we're working with a lot of community agencies to try to support our families in the community who are struggling.
So come summer, school's over.
Mm-hmm.
Kids are still hungry.
Yep.
They're not getting free meals from the school.
So they go right to Memorial Elementary School, where we offer lunch every day.
So they're still getting meals from the school.
Absolutely. We partner with the YMCA on a program that we've worked, I think this is our seventh summer. that we've been offering meals, and we also, allow folks, just based on the program, from neighboring communities if they want to come over too.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So we don't turn away anybody.
You're gonna catch grief over that.
Well, it's federal money, and we have to follow
Oh,
their
okay.
guidelines. Yeah.
So I was gonna say, when we voted for we'll talk about special needs,
Yeah.
but I've had people come and say, you're drawing people to Milford because it's such a strong special needs program.
We have exceptional special needs programs, but our percentages are, that's one area where we're right in line with the state and surrounding communities in terms of our percentages.
I've always said, if on the way to supporting Milford kids, I help some kids from around the district or outside the district, I guess I don't think that's too bad.
Yeah. And I will say, we have a lot of districts that come and see our programs for, our students with autism or our students with behavior issues, and they try to model what we're doing here in Milford because it is so successful.
Now, the state legislature
Mm-hmm.
said that they were going to invest in particular schools.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember right, it was schools with high ELL population, so high immigrants that don't speak English,
Mm-hmm.
high special needs,
Mm-hmm.
and high percentage of low income.
Correct. Which is, made us kind of the beneficiaries of the Student Opportunity Act programming. So we've added, significant Chapter 70 funds from the state over the last couple of years, which has been fantastic because it's gone hand in hand with not only the growth of students, but a growth in the percentage of students with high needs.
Well, we got $7 million incremental dollars last year.
Yeah, which is, think about historically, maybe it goes up a few 100,000, maybe $1 million one year, but that was like incredible and really, I think, is helping us kind of.
And it hit at the perfect time because I still don't agree with using one-time money for salaries.
Yep.
But we were going to lose next year $1 million of grant.
Mm-hmm.
But we still needed the teachers.
Right.
So that would have put a heck of a squeeze. And I'll give the school committee credit when we said, okay, you can have 6 out of the 7. Because that last $1 million got to make up for the grant we're losing.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that speaks to, and that's one of the reasons why the Secretary of Education came to see us, is because of the partnership between the schools in the town. And the fact that we're thinking about using, like you said, you never want to use one-time money for, repetitive expenses, because eventually the bill
don't go away.
Exactly. Eventually the bill comes due. But what we're able to do is kind of leverage that grant funding to get the teachers we needed, and then kind of, do a little long-term planning, which I think is always really, really good.
How are we with our ability to attract and maintain top teachers?
So, I think with the last few years, I think the labor markets are askew
Crazy.
for everybody. Yeah. Yeah, and it's no different in education. I'll tell you a couple anecdotes. 5 years ago, we hired an associate principal at the high school, Cicely Tucker, who this past year has transitioned, with this coming year is transitioning into a different role in the private sector. But we had 55 applicants for that position. We posted the same position this spring, and we got 17 applicants. 7 years ago, we get 300 applicants for a general elementary position. This year, we're getting 60. Almost the same percentage. 60 isn't bad for applicants, but it's a reduction of, about 60, 70%. So we're still finding, I would say, very high quality teachers, and we're being very aggressive to get them. But it's getting more and more competitive because a couple of things are happening. One is I think people are leaving the labor force, and every sector's feeling that. Yeah. But two is the percentage of folks doing undergraduate or graduate degrees in teaching or education is down about 25%. So you combine these two things where we're having just general labor market issues, and you're losing about a quarter of the folks that generally would come out. Because what would happen, and this was still the case when I first started in Milford, is we would have kids who would come out of college who would work as like a teaching assistant for 3 or 4 years, and then eventually jump into like an elementary job or a special ed job or something. And now those folks are getting teaching jobs right out of college consistently. And so that's having another impact on our teaching assistant kind of, candidate pool or talent pool. So
Do
I
we
think,
still look at, I remember your partner in crime, Bob,
yep,
he, Dr. Tremblay always said he'd rather hire somebody with their master's already, because within 2 or 3 years, they're at that level anyway.
correct. I would say we do a combination. We're really looking for the best, candidate. So if the best candidate is somebody who's right out of undergrad and they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, enthusiastic and ready to go, we'll bring that person in. A lot of the students will, do the master's degree before they start looking for a job now, because in Massachusetts you have to have it within 5 years.
Well, I remember Clark, I think they still do, offered you the 5th year
Yep.
to get your master's, but basically it was, I won't say slave labor, but you had to work in a Worcester school.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of programs like that, around the state and around the country. We're able to attract student teachers pretty consistently from places like maybe Framingham State, Worcester State, some of the colleges and other colleges in Worcester. And every once in a while, we'll get a student from Boston who might be from the area, like a BC kid or maybe a Harvard kid. But it'd be great if we had, like Milford University right in our backyard, which we just, we have schools close, but not like right next door. And the other thing we're always fighting is, the young kids want to go to Boston, they want to go to Providence. And so we're always kind of, playing that game a little bit too.
Whitewood Road, North End.
Yeah,
If you're 20 years old,
yeah,
settling in on Congress Street or
Yeah.
living in the North End or Southie,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, we do have probably, I'd say, 30 or 40 staff members who commute from like Boston, Somerville, Cambridge consistently into us. So
well, that's a reverse commute.
it's
So
not bad. It's not actually not bad, because you jump on the Pike and you see all these poor souls who are
Trying to
sitting
get into Boston.
Exactly. Although the traffic has come back, I'd say in the last 6 months, because 8 or 9 months ago there wasn't much going either way, but I think it's starting to come back a little bit.
Now, we talk about the teachers.
Hmm.
How about the support staff? Because I'm reading that a lot of communities around are having a hard time. And I mean, let's face it. If I have to prepare donuts at Dunkin' Donuts versus changing adult diapers at school,
Yep. Yeah, it's always behavioral assistants and teaching assistants are always a challenge. It's something we look at all the time. They do incredible work because they're a lot of times they're either one-on-one or small group with students, and the folks we bring in are incredibly caring, incredibly dedicated. The groups we're pulling from are very different. Like I said, 10 years ago we were grabbing folks that wanted to get their foot in the door in Milford, so they'd serve as a teaching assistant or a behavioral assistant for a couple of years to kind of say, hey, I'm really good, I'm strong, give me a chance.
I've proven myself.
Yeah, give me a chance in the classroom. And those folks, unfortunately, and actually fortunately for them, are getting teaching jobs generally right out of college. So I think that market's still shifting, and we're going to see. But universally, like substitute teachers, nobody has substitute teachers. We've done a couple of things, and we're probably going to do a little more of this, where we hold little mini job fairs, like say at Milford High School, and say if you're interested in being a teaching assistant, a behavioral assistant, a substitute teacher, working in the cafeteria with Carla, come and talk to us. And we have some of our principals there, some of our department heads there, and we have conversations with people, and they see some of the benefits of working in the town. And we'll probably do that again in August. But we did, I think, one in the fall, like late fall, kind of early winter, and we'll do another one. And we've done some kind of local career fairs too with other districts to just try to get people for all levels of positions who are interested. And everybody, every superintendent I talk to, they're facing the same things. They're saying, the number of applicants is going down, the number of qualified applicants is going down, and it's becoming more challenging to hire. And I think you could say that across the board. But the thing with teaching is you can't just walk in and say, and you can't do that in a lot of places, but we're not hiring a general person, kind of off the street. You have to have, your student teaching, some training, pass a bunch of tests. So there's a fair onboarding process.
But as an aide,
Yeah.
how do you compete with a friend's son that I know went to work at Amazon, they're paying him $20 an hour.
Yeah.
That's $40,000 a year.
Yeah.
We don't pay our aides that, do we?
If you've been with us for a while as a teaching assistant, you can kind of, we get, again, your 10 months, but
Close?
you're going to be in that vicinity. Um, it's tough because some people like to do it because they love being around kids and they don't want to be around boxes.
Yeah.
I think for some people it's a good job for them. For some folks, they want to have the same hours as their kids. So it's kind of appealing because, they start when, their students go to school and they finish when their students go to school. Some folks come to us and they say, I'm thinking about teaching, but I don't want to do a master's program. Maybe I do this for a year or two to see if I like it. And we see some of that. And we see some folks who are retired who say, I want to get some, something that keeps my, energy flowing. And so, we see people come into it for different reasons, but again, it's just more challenging because I think we're seeing, where did I see, like starting truck drivers for, I think it was Walmart, we're making $95,000 to $105,000. The Amazon, those jobs are, everywhere, whether it's delivery or warehouse work,
Yeah, nothing against them, but let's see, I have somebody who's got the life of my child in their hands,
yeah,
6, 8 hours a day,
yeah,
versus a driver who has their life in their hands. But
right.
doesn't seem like one should be making 5 times more than the other.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, but it's something, again, we always look at, are we competitive regionally? Are we competitive compared to other sectors that are, hiring folks, like you mentioned Dunkin' Donuts, Amazon, and that's something we've really got to look at because I think those places have probably raised their rates of, like their hourly rates more than like the school systems in the area because they have probably a little more flexibility to do that.
Well, the ultimate question is, do you have enough aides? Are you able to fill the need?
I think we do. It was a tougher question to answer last year during the pandemic because there was a lot, when the pandemic was at its height, because there was a lot of folks that maybe would do that work otherwise, but maybe didn't want to be in person in a space.
Yeah, but we were paying them not to work anyway.
For just a very small portion of the time. Yeah, but I think like that impacted maybe some folks that maybe had some underlying conditions or maybe were a little older and said, geez,
Too much of a risk.
yeah, like the risk reward kind of diminished in those cases. So we'll have a better sense this year. I think it's going to continue to be a challenge though, to kind of, I think we're able to hire folks, but our margins are a lot like thinner than what they were before in terms of, we're just not seeing and it's universal. It's not unique to Milford. You could talk to any superintendent in the district, the state, and they'll say, I can't get substitutes. I struggle with like my entry level type positions. And if I'm looking for a science or a world language teacher, I'm just hoping I get that one.
Well, I would think the science and the math used to be tough, but it must be amazingly hard to hire somebody.
It is. What happened? It's happened for the first time this year. Is we're seeing some of our teachers, particularly in the sciences and in mathematics, getting recruited away to private sector gigs because they're really struggling to fill positions. And one of the things that the private sector can offer is like a hybrid work environment where, we did it for a period of time, but that's not going to be a model that's sustainable for us.
Ultimate question. I come to Milford. I have children. Will my kids get a good education in Milford?
No, they're going to get a phenomenal education. It's world class. If we can get the student wherever they need to go. Our students are competitive at the most selective colleges in the country and in the world. And we're offering more and more diverse programming to kind of get students who maybe aren't interested in going to college right after high school and, looking at maybe a trade or getting ready into work. And we're providing a lot of support in that area now.
Now, Kevin, I know you have a jaundiced view. I have a jaundiced view. But to me, the ultimate judges are the universities. Are our kids getting into the prime universities?
Yeah, and they're getting into top level, colleges and universities, and the top level colleges and universities are getting more and more competitive. Northeastern University, which has been a kind of a staple in Boston for years, the acceptance rate this year was 7%. 7%.
See,
the same as Northwestern.
I was going to say, and I thought with the price of education going through the ceiling, because at Holy Cross I had a discussion with the previous president where I said, how can you send me a letter that starts and tells me all the great things you're doing and then say, because of this, tuition and room and board will only be 68,000.
Right.
I said,
Right.
Father, the word only and 68,000
Yeah.
should not be used in the same sentence.
But that goes back to the beginning conversation we had about, how so many kids are coming out with, incredible debt. And that's another reason why folks aren't going into education, because, they don't necessarily see that, if you stay with teaching, you're going to make you're going to make a decent living. But, at the start, sometimes, if you go to, biotech or, a high-tech startup, you might be making, $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 more.
That's hard to turn away when you got, well, you've got a couple kids in college.
I've got one just out and two going in.
I remember the day that I paid my last check.
That's a good feeling.
Oh, God, was
It's a
it
good,
wonderful.
it's a good feeling.
So the kids are getting into the top schools.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've had kids this past year, I think Boston College, Dartmouth, some of the NESCAC schools, and I can't remember which ones they were into, this like a Middlebury or Bowdoin. So they're getting into the top schools in the country and the most selective schools in the country. So, and we offer tremendous AP courses. We have great Project Lead the Way courses, early college courses. So kids, any student can be really challenged through the Milford High School
We made any
curriculum.
progress on helping the kids who aren't going to college?
Yeah,
Because
so,
I brought up, like, my father.
yep,
Put him in organic chemistry, he ain't gonna do well.
yep.
Put a tool in his hand, and he was an artist. But for him to get into BVT,
Hmm.
you had to be, what, top 15% of your academic class?
Right, at least in the top third.
Okay.
But yeah, so one thing we did is one position we added at the high schools, we added a career counselor who's really focusing on those students who are, going directly into the workforce. And it's not just like counseling them, but it's helping them get into internships before they get in, or even get into jobs or apprenticeships where they get paid a little bit while they're in high school, and they can jump into, kind of, a more lucrative job when they get out. So it's really just trying to like educate the students to say, like, if you come out with a high school diploma, what are some of your options and what can you do? And they're connecting them to, maybe like maybe not a full college degree, but maybe like a program at a community college where you go for like, 5 or 6 months, get a certificate, and then are able to do something like reading imaging at a hospital or something along those lines, which are, well-paying jobs.
But now, how do we differentiate our kids? Because I like what you're saying, but this is not the smart kids go here and the not so smart
No,
go
we
there.
don't try. We don't try to limit anybody. What we try to really do is have conversations about, number one, like, what do you want to do, and what do you want to be when you grow up, and how
I'm
you
still
doing.
trying to answer that
Well,
question.
it's the age-old question, and kind of, how do we get you there? And we don't want to say because you are who you are, you're going to go, in this particular way or that particular way. We really want to maximize kids' potential and kind of say, like, these are the options that are out here. It's on you to kind of get to where you want to go, and it's on us to support you.
My daughter put it in perspective for me when she said, Dad, my job as an educator is to get kids to their potential, and maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah.
She said, but teaching special needs kids, not everybody has the same potential. Doesn't mean one's better than the other, but they're just different. So, you think about some of the traditional trades. I just had an electrician come to the house. $400 later, he left. That's not bad pay.
No, and you can't find a plumber, an electrician, or particularly if you have a smaller job. So that's one of the things that we try to, like, we have a building trades program now, and all the builders in the area want to connect with us because they're dying for, folks who can come in and, not only, have the skills to do the work, they can teach those, but can you look somebody in the eye? Can you have a conversation? Can you work as part of a team? Some of those other things that are so critically important, regardless of the field.
Now, I didn't think we could have programs that competed with BVT.
Yeah, so the building trades actually doesn't. So we would have to get special permission if we were going to do it, but the building trades program actually is not in direct competition with BVT, which is why we offer it.
That's great, because I remember the hotel program.
Yeah.
And there's a bank in the middle of...
There is, yeah. The business and banking program.
I didn't know what it was, but, God bless Milford Fed. I've been with them since they gave me my first little book when I was in high school. And
Yeah.
I never could cut that tie. You know, they took care of me when I was first starting, and I keep using them.
And we've had a really nice partnership with them, and it's been, I think the programming is really good. And they're even getting into where kids are developing business plans and doing kind of Shark Tank style like proposals, where we bring in people from different executives from different companies, and they give the students feedback on their ideas.
I even saw that there's a candy store opening for the special needs kids.
Yeah. So they'll sell snacks and popcorn and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I lobbied Jen Walsh to say there better be some sugar-free candy in there, because otherwise my wife won't let me go support it.
But the other thing they do is our bistro students will make breakfast sandwiches or muffins and deliver them to teachers in the high school building, which is great too.
Well, but again, you're just teaching them life skills, because a lot of times people forget that, was it 21 they age out?
22, when they hit 22.
22?
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden, if they don't have the basic life skills, that's going to be twice as hard for them to live on their own.
Which is why we've had programs with like Milford Hospital. We've had programs where we have students go and work for part of the day, so they're really able to get some support from our folks and kind of some experience out in the community, because it's about finding the right fit too for some of these students, because if you go into a place where you're really supported, it's going to be successful. And if you have a prior relationship, and they'll still call on us sometimes to help some situations out. But the programs like at the high school are fantastic, particularly for our students who are with us till they're 22, to really kind of prepare them for that next step in life.
But again, as you mentioned, the town meeting is supporting the kids.
100%.
I remember when the bus program first came out, and it was $250,000.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, your staff cheats, because the night we were going to vote as whether we support the program or not, I remember sitting at the table and looking at the doors, and there's all these little faces in the windows that the special needs group had brought all the special needs kids.
That was probably just a coincidence. They just probably happened by.
Yeah, I looked at Chris Moran, who was next to me, and said, "Oh, we're being set up." Oh, we're being set up, because there's no way when these kids got there and said, the only way I can work is I need transportation, I need help.
Right.
These are Milford kids. They bleed Milford red. We're going to say no?
Yeah.
Well, what do you think's the biggest challenge coming up?
I'm going to go back to the student population. It's the unknown piece. Like, we can't predict how many kids are coming through the door, and that's really the biggest challenge for us. If I knew that there's going to be 100 kids each additional year, that we could really prepare for that. But the general population trends are like declining in the Northeast, but we're increasing.
But Milford's going up.
But we're going up, so we got to figure that out.
Well, thank you for what you've done over the last 10 years. Hopefully there's many more years that you can continue. As always, the fundamental question comes up: can I get a good education in Milford? And you heard it. You can get a great education in Milford. Get to know the school system. Get to know the teachers. Get to know what's available for your kids. And you'll get a great education. I happen to have had the privilege of mentoring a graduate. He applied to 6 schools. And this is English as a second language type program, got into all of them, and got enough scholarships that it's costing him $2,000 a year to go to UMass.
That's awesome.
Can't ask for better. So as always, to our 6 loyal viewers, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Thank you for joining.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just searching for my soul.